Automatons are challenging for newbies and veterans alike, and I know that a lot of veterans, especially bug players, do not like to fight the automatons because they are quite challenging. But I am both a creek diver and somebody who dedicates themselves to fighting the automatons on a regular basis. They are my favorite faction to fight. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to create a guide to help out people who are just starting out, who have the basic equipment, and would like to know how to survive against the bots. So whether you're a veteran player or you're a new player coming to the game and you want to fight the automatons, here are some tips to help you get into the process. Before we get too far into the video, I just want to specify that my microphone wasn't picking up when I was saying the beginning of some of the units' names, so I'll be putting text on the screen somewhere to indicate what they're actually called, so if you don't hear it properly, then it'll be right there for you to know what I'm talking about. So going with the theme of this being a newbie-friendly guide, we're going to be using only the default starting equipment, so that will be the Liberator, the Peacemaker, the Grenade, the MG43 machine gun, and the Orbital Laser Cannon. Precision Strike, rather, that's what it's called. And we're going to be talking about unarmored and light armor units first. So let's go ahead and start with the Troopers. Troopers, Raiders, and Commissars are the basic infantry of the bots, and they look like walking metal skeletons. These guys have light armor throughout their bodies, and they can be defeated very easily with any weapon. Commissars can also appear in jetpack form, and they will launch themselves at you in an effort to cut you to pieces or shoot you if that doesn't work. If you are ever engaged by jetpack bots, dive away from them as soon as you can. Their jetpacks will often explode as soon as the bot dies, and they can take you out if you are too close to them when they die. Berserkers, usually found on easy and above, are identified by their twin chainsaws occupying both of their arms. They only have light armor around their upper torso. The rest of their body is completely unarmored. Aim for the belly, and even your default weapons will make short work of them. Don't bother aiming for the arms or the legs. These parts are swaying and moving around so much that you'll have a hard time hitting them and you'll just wind up wasting ammo. Scout Striders, found on medium or above, are two-legged walkers similar to the AT-ST or the Chicken Walker from Star Wars. They can be defeated from the side or the back by simply shooting the pilot. The rest of the walker is sporting medium or heavy armor. Medium armor in the legs, heavy up on the front cockpit area. So you cannot take it down just from shooting at the front with the Liberator or the Peacemaker. On higher difficulties, rank 8 and above, Striders will appear as Rocket Striders. These are completely enclosed and cannot be killed without a medium or heavy penetrating weapon, and they'll have extremely deadly rocket packs that can one-shot you. The universal way of killing Scout Striders, whether they are in the form of their exposed or enclosed version, is to shoot the legs with your MG43. Again, their legs sport medium armor, so you can destroy the joints and bring down the walker. Keep in mind, though, that sometimes the driver will survive the destruction of their walker, especially on lower difficulties, so make sure that you're taking them out so they don't call for reinforcements. Devastators are usually found on medium or above, but they can spawn in trivial missions as mission objectives. They're identified by having a bit of a bulkier, larger body and thin arms. They can be easily defeated by shooting at their pelvis or their belly. These locations are completely devoid of armor, so if you ever see one walking your way, simply duck behind cover or dive to the ground to avoid their initial attack, then hit them in the land where the sun don't shine. Rocket Devastators can be found on challenging and above. These guys can be frightening to fight at first, but once you identify their animations and how to avoid getting hit by their rockets, you can easily identify the right time to engage them. You can defeat them the exact same way as the regular Devastators. Just shoot for the pelvis and the belly and you'll be just fine. Heavy Devastators, found on challenging and above, are identified by their riot shields. They're a menace to new players and veterans alike. Their shield blocks most of their body, and they have an extremely fast-firing weapon. The absolute worst place you can be when fighting these guys is right in front of them and without any cover. Now, unlike the previous two Devastators, these guys are not weak around their pelvis and their belly. The only way to get them to expose their pelvis and belly to you is by shooting their arm off where their weapon is being held. This area is considered light armor, so you can easily shoot the weapon out of their hand with either your primary weapon or your special weapon. It doesn't really matter. But you'll find that when you're trying to shoot at the pelvis with your primary or your support weapon, or even your secondary, that your bullets will just wind up ricocheting off of the target and hit you instead. So the guaranteed best way to take down a heavy Devastator is by shooting them in the head or with the red backpack that you can see over the top of their head. Basically, aim for the top of their body and you'll be able to kill them just fine with your primary if you can hit them in the head, or with your support weapon if you can hit them around that general area. Hulks, found on Challenging and above, can be terrifying, especially if they have the flamethrower and chainsaw combo. They are heavily armored throughout their body. Believe it or not, but their head is heavily armored. If you thought you could take it out the same way that you could the others, you're wrong. Only heavy support weapons will be capable of hitting these guys from the head and taking them out. But if you are still operating with the basic MG43 and Orbital Precision Strike, then the only place you'll have a chance of hitting them and killing them is by aiming for the large vent on their back. Their entire body is heavy armor, but their back vent is unarmored, so even the default Liberator can take a Hulk down. It's a slow burn after the back vent is destroyed, but that's the only reliable way to defeat them without having access to more powerful stratagems or support weapons. Keep in mind that these guys can appear as objectives in medium missions, but they will start spawning out in the world as dropship reinforcements and patrols on Challenging and above. Barrager Tanks, found on medium and above, are a weird exception as far as tanks go. These tanks can be identified by a large rectangular rocket pack in place of its standard turret, and it can rain fire down on you from a long range. Even in close quarters, it can shoot directly in front of itself. But unlike the turrets on other tanks, you can kill this one with your primary weapon or even your pistol if the situation was dire. Aim for the front of the rocket pack, the sides, or the underside when it aims upwards. All of these locations are lightly armored and can be killed by a Liberator, Peacemaker, or your MG43. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to the medium and heavy weak points. These are units that you cannot defeat with just the Liberator or the Peacemaker. However, the MG43 has medium armor penetration, so if you aim for the right spot, you can take down these targets with your default starting support weapon stratagem. Annihilator Tanks, found on medium and above, are identified by their turret that looks like the same ones that you'll see on the towers or on the map. They also have a hidden assault gun on the front of the chassis of the tank, so try your best not to stand in front of the tank when you're trying to find its weaknesses. The two medium armor locations on the Annihilator come in the form of the vent on the back of the turret, or the little two box locations on the back of the chassis itself. If you can't reposition yourself enough to hit the vent, just hit the little box area, and with enough shots you'll kill it. Now keep in mind the treads on this tank are also considered medium armor, but destroying them will not destroy the tank. You have to either hit the back of the vent or the rear box area to take it out. Detector Tanks, also found on medium and above, are identified by their anti-air turret. These tanks are about as fast as the other variants, but their turrets turn much faster than the Annihilator or the Barrager. There are two ways of dealing with these guys, but it can be tricky. With the turret rotating fast enough that you can't get behind the turret, getting a shot in close quarters can be almost impossible. The easiest way to destroy it, especially in close quarters, is to aim for the box area just like you would do with the Annihilator. The second option is a bit trickier but doable. When the turret starts to fire, it temporarily slows down its ability to turn the turret. Aside from the heavy plates around the front and on the barrels, the rest of the turret is made up of medium armor. If you can get out of its line of fire, you can unload into the turret from any direction and destroy it with ease. Don't try to rush for the vents though while it's firing, because it will usually resume tracking you before you have a chance to get that far behind it. If you want something specific to aim for, look for the little pipes on the sides or the top of the turret. Gunships can be found on hard and above, and they can be killed by the MG43 and other medium damage weapons. But have a care, they will fire rocket volleys at you and their assault cannon while strafing. Your best defense against gunships is to find a building or a rock formation and use it as cover between shots. There's a slight delay between rocket volleys and assault cannon attacks, so use that time to poke your head out and fire. Aim for the thrusters on the front and the back of the gunship. The entirety of the thrusters, the flames included in the thrusters themselves, have medium armor, so it doesn't matter where you hit the thruster as long as you're hitting the same one consistently. Don't bother aiming for the head or its body. These areas are heavily armored and will be impervious to your MG43. Now let's see if I can get through this without stuttering too much. So the next big challenge that you're going to be up against is the Factory Striders. These guys can be found on Challenging and above, sometimes as mission objectives and other times just spawning out in the field. These guys are the biggest and most heavily armored units the bots currently have access to. They have 4 weak points that the medium penetration weapons can take advantage of, but don't go in guns blazing. Factory Striders have cannons on top of them that can only be destroyed by explosive anti-tank weapons or by orbital strikes. It also sports twin chainguns on the bottom of its head. If that wasn't enough, it can also deploy 4 standard Devastators for support whenever it needs help. But these are on a timed interval, so you won't be constantly bombarded by Devastators. So the first weak point is the twin chainguns on its head. They both have medium armor, so your MG43 can take these out if you have an angle on them. Do not try to take these guys out from the front. Once the chainguns are destroyed, the only real threat is the top cannon, but as long as you remain close to the Strider, that won't pose a threat to you. The third weakness is its sides. The panels between the front and the back legs are heavy armor, so you'll need to either use an orbital precision strike or an eagle bombing run to get rid of the armor. But once the armor is gone, you'll be able to see these exposed circuits inside. The circuits have medium armor, so your MG43 will be able to take it out this way as well. Alternatively, if you have another eagle bombing run, you can throw another one at this thing, and if it hits it from the side in the right spot, boom, that Factory Strider is done for. The fourth weakness on this thing is its back upper half. If you can strip away the heavy armor on the upper half of its back, the components within are also considered medium armor and can be destroyed by your MG43. The main component that your MG43 can destroy is the Strider's underbelly. When it isn't actively deploying Devastators, the underbelly is a flat sheet of metal that can be unloaded into. Whether you're using the standard MG43, an autocannon, or any other special non-explosive support weapon, the belly is the largest and most visible medium armor location that can be used to kill the Strider. But of course, you need to destroy the turrets before you can get in there, and you also need to avoid getting stomped on. Now it's important to keep in mind that there are other ways to kill this thing, such as aiming for the eye or the top of its head. However, these locations are heavily armored. You will not be able to destroy the Strider this way without access to a heavy penetrating weapon such as the recoilless rifle or the autocannon. So that's all you need to know in terms of shooting the enemy, but we're going to go over some general tips as well to help you survive out there. I'm both a Malevelon Creek diver, or a creeker if you will, and someone who prefers to fight bots, so I can tell you that there are a few major mistakes I see from newbies and people who are used to fighting bugs. Now while the bots have been dialed back a bit in terms of firepower, numbers, and frequency of reinforcements, there are still some tips that I still consider relevant. So the first tip, if you're going to engage a group of enemies, prioritize the skeleton guys first. While things like Striders and Devastators can hurt you pretty badly, they are incapable of calling in reinforcements. If you don't want an army dropping on your head, get rid of the skeleton guys as quick as you can. This is a big one. This is especially good to know if you're moving into more difficult situations, more difficult missions. If you lose your gear, don't charge back into the fight to retrieve it. When you're outnumbered and there's a wall of rockets and lasers between you and your gear, the worst thing you can do for your team is run back into the fray and try to retrieve it. Either join your allies and pick off the bots, or advance in the opposite direction and wait for them to despawn. Yeah, it sucks to be down a weapon, but I prefer to have a higher reinforcement budget over you having your weapon. So on to the next point. Get used to diving, and I don't mean hell diving. Patrols will walk by you if you go prone and stay behind a rock or a bush. Get caught on fire by one of the explosive barrels, dive. Have a jetpacking commissar coming at you, dive. Rocket barrage coming from a rocket devastator, dive. Piccolo coming at you at 200 miles per hour, dive. Detector Towers are another major threat that you're going to encounter as a Helldiver. Detector Towers are often jokingly referred to as the Eyes of Sauron because they are giant towers with red eyes at the top of them. As long as you make sure not to get within range of the eye, then you can typically approach it and bomb it with an orbital strike, an eagle, or a hell bomb if you don't have either. If these things detect you, then they will call down endless reinforcements on you until you can actually destroy it, and that can be very bad news, especially if the rest of your team is deciding to stay and fight. You'll notice in some of this footage that I'm sneaking around an awful lot, especially when I'm starting to get close to enemy bases. And the reason I do this is because they typically have these anti-personnel turrets deployed to monitor the perimeter of their bases. And if you are shot by the heavy variant or the light variant of these turrets, they will make very short work of you. You really want to make sure that you're not getting spotted by these guys as you're approaching. You want to take them out as soon as you can, and then once they're out of the way, then you can move in and deal with the bot fabricators or whatever other targets are in the area. Sneaking is essential. Crouching and going prone can be very useful for avoiding detection regardless of the weight of your armor. Now keep in mind that when you're walking around, you're going to make more noise. Light armor doesn't make as much noise, heavy armor makes a lot of noise. And you're more prone to being spotted if you're in heavy armor. Medium armor, you can reasonably sneak around. As you can see in the footage, I'm using the default Helldiver armor, no special bonuses to sneaking. You just need to be careful about what you're doing and where you're going. Turret towers can be really dangerous. If they hear you firing your weapon, there's a good chance they'll start turning to shoot at you. And if they hit you, it's usually a one-shot kill. Your best chance of dealing with them is to get behind them and shoot them in the vent. Keep in mind though that when they start to get fired upon, they will start to turn the turret in the direction where you're firing at them from. And depending on the terrain, you can simply walk around the turret and shoot it in the back from the other direction. But if you're in a position where you're either pinned down by two turrets or you simply can't get around it that easily, then just wait for it to disengage. It will eventually give up and just decide that you must have left the area since it can't hit you. So it will turn around, it will go back into its neutral position, and then you can shoot it in the back again. Easy peasy. Strategem Jammers. Now these things are a major threat to newbies. I always see newbies running into these places and just getting destroyed. All of their reinforcement budget depleted as soon as they drop into a mission. They are the worst. So if you're ill prepared for these things, here's some little tips to help you out so that you don't die as much. First, remember what I said about diving and diving often. The enemy will charge you in close quarters in here, so you want to know to dive backwards and get out of range of them, especially if you're facing off against Berserkers. Scout Striders will often be inside of these places, so remember, if you have your MG43 with you, aim for the legs, shoot their joints out, and get rid of them. There's usually at least one or two bot fabricators in this location. Identify them and destroy them if you can. They're not essential, but if you can get them, all the better to stop reinforcements from getting to you. Now there are two ways of destroying these things. Well, actually there's three ways, but we can get, so I'll go ahead and go over them. So the first is if you ever see a bot fabricator tied to the actual Strategem Jammer itself, you can typically destroy the bot fabricator and that will also destroy the jammer as well. It doesn't always work, but most of the time it will. So if you ever see a bot fabricator directly attached to the jammer, destroy it with a long-range explosive or whatever means you have available to you, and you won't even need to worry about assaulting the actual base itself. The second way is, of course, by calling down the Hell Bomb as soon as the jammer has been deactivated. This is the most common way of destroying it because you usually won't have a stratagem on hand for getting rid of these things. The third way is by using a 500k Eagle, and that, I don't remember what level you can get access to that, but you can use the Eagle for destroying research centers as well as for destroying Detector Towers and of course the Strategem Jammer once the Strategem Jammer has been deactivated. So if you don't feel like calling down the Hell Bomb or dealing with the complicated mess of Dance Dance Revolution that the Hell Bomb is, call down your 500k, get out of the area as fast as you can, and boom, Strategem Jammer dealt with. The other big thing that's important to remember is know your exit when you're leaving the Strategem Jammer location. Sometimes enemies will investigate the fight if they are coming from a patrol or what have you, so if you know a particular exit, take it, and that's your way out. And that's about all I've got for you guys. Now keep in mind that these tips are not the be-all end-all only solution or style to fighting the bots, but if you're brand new to the game and you have very limited equipment, this will help you a great deal for moving into their territory. I hope you guys have enjoyed this guide. I hope it's been helpful, and both you newbies and veterans, I hope that you have an easier time fighting the automatons from here on out. See you planet side.